The Packers are getting healthy as they prepare to go to the Pacific Northwest to take on the Seahawks. How does it change the matchups in this one?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you hit that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Everyone practiced. Everyone that is available to practiced, except Javon Bullard. And that is notable. We'll get there. Romeo Doubs and Evan Williams are not out of concussion protocol. They are moving through concussion protocol. The Romeo Doubs one is particularly concerning because this is now practice week 2, where he is a participant, a full participant, I guess, but is not cleared from concussion protocol. I can't remember that happening with a player. Usually it's, no, they haven't practiced, we're still waiting. But to be back on the field and still not cleared from concussion protocol is bizarre and troubling. That Evan Williams is moving through the process is good for him. His presence on the field is going to be very, very important on Sunday. And the reason is Jaire Alexander, who practiced last week but didn't play, is a full participant all week. And I expect at this moment he will play. When you have to face a trio of receivers like the Seahawks have, that is on its own extremely important. But then because of what it does to everything else, to not have Javon Bullard, now you need Jaire Alexander. Because if you're going to move Keisean Nixon into the slot, which is a totally acceptable thing, he's been better on the outside than in the slot, but he's an experienced veteran player now as a slot corner. The Packers have been a top 10 defense this year by EPA per play, defending slot receivers, in part because of Javon Bullard. But Keisean Nixon has been in there enough that I'm comfortable saying he has contributed to that in a meaningful, positive way. If you have to play Key in the slot and Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes against this group of receivers, that would be pretty troubling. That would be pretty troubling. But if Ja's coming back, now you feel confident about what's happening over there. And I would say you got DK Metcalf when he's outside. Period. Even if it's not man coverage, you are going to line up. And they did that. They traveled. When Ja was out there week 1, they did some traveling with A.J. Brown. I would not be surprised if we saw Ja travel some with DK Metcalf and just let Keisean Nixon in the slot do what he does. But having Jaire Alexander and Evan Williams, if assuming Javon Bullard is healthy, would have let everyone else slot into their most natural positions. Javon Bullard's not going to be out there. But if Evan Williams is, then at least you are able to move Keisean Nixon in and feel good about that. Matt LaFleur said there's going to be a continued rotation with Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes. I don't understand why, because Eric Stokes has been terrible, just really bad. And I feel bad even saying that because he is such a positive player, such a positive kid. He was so promising. I was such a big fan of his. And I mean, I continue to be a fan of him as a player, but it's just like, it's hard to watch because the confidence is gone. Some of the twitchiness and explosiveness is clearly gone. And it just stinks to watch that. The Packers defense, and we're going to talk more about the matchups here in a second. But you have to be able to defend Geno Smith in the middle of the field, mostly the middle of the field deep. Having both Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney goes a long way in doing that. Also, and we talked about this earlier in the week with the cover 2 thing, having a dynamic linebacker who can be that middle field post runner. Quay Walker can do it. But now you can blitz Quay Walker and play that cover 2 behind with Edgerrin Cooper, who's practicing this week. Now, will he start? No, of course he won't, because that's just been the way that this has gone all year for whatever reason. But he will play, and my guess is in the second half will play every third down and most second and longs. When they're in nickel, he will be the linebacker, would be my guess, for most of the game. He won't be to start because that's just the way that Jeff Hafley has chosen to play it. Anthony Campanile, the linebackers coach, has chosen to play it. I can't explain why. But that has been the way that they've been able to do it. Now, if he's playing, that's useful. That's better than him not playing. Even if he's only playing 40, 50% of snaps. And I think in the second half, especially if they need to get some stops, he will be out there. Having all of those dudes is essential. Now, I think that the dirty little secret of this game is this Seahawks offense is just not as good as people think. Not as good as the names on the roster would suggest. Not as good as the fantasy football profiles would imply. And for the Packers, I think that there are key elements that can be exploited here, key matchups that can be exploited. And the same is true on the other side of the ball, where this Seahawks defense is certainly playing better football than they had. But they haven't played an offense like this. And there are certain ways that the Packers play that are extremely advantageous to Green Bay. Not to mention, I think the Packers getting Romeo Doubs back, another boundary receiver. Devin Witherspoon has been a great slot corner. I think this is going to be a tough game for Jaden Reed. They're going to have to scheme some stuff up for him. Tariq Woolen is one of the few guys who has the size and speed to run with Christian Watson. But there's another corner, and you have another boundary receiver. And if you can keep those guys fresh, that's the kind of thing, the depth there, that can really put some strain on a defense that has been playing very good football, especially the last month, but really for longer than that. The Packers, though, this is a style of game. This reminds me of the 49ers game, where I felt like there were key stylistic matchups, places where the Packers were really good, that the 49ers were struggling with, that played in perfectly to the way the Packers want to play. I'll explain why this week is very much the same. That's next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus score an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, Omaha Steaks consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. With legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30, not percent, dollars off with promo code NFL. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. There's an old cliche in sports, and I try not to traffic in cliches, but things happen, that styles make fights. And when we were going into the 49ers game, I felt like there was a stylistic way that the Packers were going to be able to get down on that 49ers defense. And to me, there is a chain here that I want to lay out. And we hit on it a little bit yesterday with Corbin Smith, our Locked On Seahawks host. But I want to lay it cleanly on the table here. So the Seahawks, by DVOA, actually have an above average run defense. Okay. But it's bottom 10 in yards per carry, bottom half in success rate, dead on average in EPA per rush. Yes, they've been better lately, but the volume has been way down. The Jets barely ran on them. The Cardinals, the first time, barely tried to run on them. The 49ers were pretty successful, over 4 yards a carry. The Cardinals this last time, over 5 yards a carry. None of those teams run the ball the way the Packers run the ball. It's not even close. The Packers are third in rush offense DVOA. Top 5 in all the big metrics. This is one of the best rushing teams in the league. I wrote about this yesterday at The Leap. One of the most diverse rushing games in the league. They show so much eye candy, so much motion. It is tough to stop. Now, the Seahawks have a very good front. Byron Murphy, the rookie, Leonard Williams. They've got some very good players up front. Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu is coming back. They've got some good players up front. This is a penetration-based front. Guys who want to get up the field. And the Packers, they want to play downhill. They want to come right at you. I think there is a stylistic thing here. Now, the Cardinals have some, they run some gap seam stuff too. Power rushing team. They're not as good as the Packers. That's the thing. And I heard this from some Seahawks fans. Oh, no, we've faced some good offenses. This is the top 10 offenses Cardinals team. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's like a team playing Josh Allen and going, well, they haven't faced a quarterback this good. And the other team going, well, we played Brock Purdy. Yeah, he's a fine quarterback. He's solid. Might even be a top 10 quarterback. Might even. Not Josh Allen. This Packers offense right now. That's how good they are. That's how good they are. So, okay. The running game, I expect to be able to work. Okay. The Seahawks defense has one of the worst statistical profiles off play action in the league. They have allowed the most touchdowns off play action this year, 10. They are the fourth worst in EPA per play defending play action. Only the Jaguars give up more yards this season off play action. Only the Saints have allowed more yards after catch above expectation than the Seahawks. They have been better lately, but I don't think the problems are solved because they put a rookie and a new player in. Last thing here. Well, maybe. This Packers team, after the first quarter, and I mentioned this, our pal Dusty Evie pointed this out. They played in 12 personnel 44% of the time. 44, almost 50, almost half the time they're in a 2 tight end set. And Luke Musgrave has been practicing this week, designated to return. So, okay, Packers want to play big. This Seahawks team has been one of the worst base personnel defenses in the league this year. I understand that part of that season is from different linebackers being on the field, but that seems like good matchups to me. Okay, let's flip. Other side of the ball. What do we got? Well, we have a Packers defense, and I think there's been this idea that the Packers defense, because they've given up a bunch of middle of the field opportunities to the Dolphins and the Lions, that this is now evidence that they are a team that can be exploited in the middle of the field. They are still a top 10 defense. Still a top 10 defense defending the middle of the field. The Seahawks, yes, they do target the middle of the field, but they target the middle of the field down the field. They want to take shots. Geno Smith, one of the best quarterbacks in the league this year, creating deep EPA. Packers, third best defense by DVOA against deep balls. They want to create deep overs, slot fades, big posts. And they can throw those. Geno Smith has the arm. He has the arm talent. He has the arm arrogance to say, I can fit this ball in between a pair of defenders. And he will do it. He will. But it's not the part of the field where the Packers are struggling. The Packers, in the intermediate part of the field and the short part of the field, that's where they're having some issues. Well, the Seahawks are 24th in EPA on intermediate throws. This is just not part of how their offense works. They are really an all or nothing offense. And the dirty little secret, I mentioned this earlier, the dirty little secret, the Seahawks by DVOA are an average offense. An average offense. Average. Not good, not great. Average. So when you look at the matchups, like just take DVOA. Packers offense relative to the Seahawks defense. Packers have the advantage. Seahawks defense relative to the Packers offense. Wait, no, we did that already. Packers offense against the Seahawks defense. Packers have the advantage. One of the best offenses in the league. Seahawks, very good defense, not elite. Seahawks offense against the Packers defense. Packers defense has the advantage. I listened to a podcast the other day with two very people I think are very smart. I'm not even going to name them because it's not about personally attacking these people. Big podcast. Both people picked the Seahawks. Explain that to me. I think stylistically, the Seahawks, and if you want to say their defense is playing better, okay, but they play a chaos defense. Well, the best version of that is the Vikings. And the Packers already saw the Vikings. They put up 29 points on the Vikings, over 400 yards on the Vikings. And that was with an injured Jordan Love. And without a mini bye. Tell me how that makes sense. I think this is a game where the Packers have some very clear advantages because of the way they already want to play, because of the things that they already do well. And so I understand the Seahawks, for example, have the best pass defense by EPA on straight dropbacks, no play action. Okay. But if they can't stop Josh Jacobs, at least not consistently, and the Packers are going to get you in base personnel, which is suboptimal for you, are you going to play Devin Witherspoon outside or is he going to be off the field? This is something that I think we need to ask. And that's not your optimal lineup, but it's the Packers' optimal lineup. And then you get into play action where we know the Seahawks have not been good this season for whatever you want to say. The bigger sample size says they are terrible defending play action. That's the Packers' bread and butter. They are the best play action team in the NFL. Even if you're improved, even if you're a top 10 team defending play action, and they're not. The Packers are the best team at doing the play action, pressing that easy button. The advantages to me scream out for the Packers to win. Now, does that mean they will? No, there's no guarantees. You still have to go out and do it. You still have to go out and take it. The Packers are favorites, though, on the road for a reason. And this is an opportunity for the Packers to show it. To show why. To show how they match up with a team that has been better defensively, that can rush the passer. But at the same time, I understand the Lions do not have the talent that the Seahawks did up front. They had their safeties. They had Kirby Joseph. They had Brian Branch. They had Carlton Davis. They had Terran Arnold. They had their secondary that has put together one of the best seasons in the league. The Packers ate them up. over the course of the game. 10 yards per attempt. Ran the ball. This Seahawks defense is not as good as even the version of the Lions that we saw last Thursday. Certainly not as good as the version of the Lions we saw the first time around when the Packers had over 400 yards of offense. Don't drop the ball on third down. Don't drop the ball on fourth down either, for sure. I think this is a game. I don't think they're going to dominate the 49ers or the Seahawks the way they did the 49ers because Geno Smith is better than Brandon Allen. But you can pressure Geno Smith. You can blitz Geno Smith. And he will make mistakes. He has all year. I love this matchup for Green Bay. And I think this is one of those games that could be a 34-17 kind of game, 30-20 kind of game. A game that the Packers win by double digits and we go, okay. This is the third best team by DVOA in the league right now. And there are people out there, smart people, who think it's weird that they're going on the road and they're 2.5-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel. That's weird. No, it's not. Now, to win, they got to score. To score, you got to be efficient in the red zone. And to be efficient in the red zone, the Packers have to stop with the penalties. Have to. That's next on Locked On Packers. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with today's sponsor. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Yeah, first $5 bet could be on the Packers money line. Could be on the Packers -2.5. I really like the Packers -2.5. I think that gives you the opportunity for the Packers to win by a field goal and you cover. Love that. This opened at 3.5. I frankly don't understand the action on Seattle. This is a team that at various points this year looked like their season was over. Packers never looked like that. I don't get it. So if you see an edge, go to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now for your second listen, go check out Locked On NFL, now with 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. I went back through and I looked at every single trip to the red zone that the Packers made this season. And I have been the guy that's saying, look, this team is too good, play to play, down to down on offense for this red zone stuff to continue to be a problem. I still believe that. In fact, I believe that more than ever after having looked at this data. In Jordan Love's starts, so that includes the Jaguars game that he didn't finish, and the Packers win, they have a red zone touchdown rate of 63%. Okay, does that mean anything to you? Probably not. In games Jordan Love starts and Green Bay loses, they have a 55% red zone touchdown rate. You may be going, but Peter, 63% versus 55%, that's not that big a difference. Well, 63%, if it were your season-long rate of touchdowns in the red zone, would be 7th in the NFL. 55%, if it were your average for the season, would be 17th in the NFL. It's the difference between a top 10 red zone offense and an average to below average red zone offense. This should not be surprising. And in 2 of their 4 losses, the Packers were 4 of 5 in the red zone. But, including last week when the Packers kicked the field goal instead of going for it, as I advocated, that 4-point difference ends up being the margin of the game. Same thing against Minnesota. They went 4 or 5 in the red zone in that game. The one opportunity they missed that ends up being the difference in the game. So this has been hugely impactful on this team. That is not novel analysis. You knew that was likely going to be the case. But I went back and looked because, and this was inspired by a follower of mine on Twitter, and I shout out to them. I went back and looked at every missed opportunity, and I included the Malik Willis starts because I was looking specifically for dick stepping, for lack of a better phrase. Red zone trips where the Packers beat themselves with a penalty. So out of 23 failed opportunities in the red zone, the Packers had a penalty on 8 of those failed opportunities. They also turned it over twice and had a failed on downs twice. Now, those are stops, so those count. Josh Jacobs fumbled at the 1. Like those kinds of things, they're kind of fluky. But if we really want to break this down, of those 23 trips, 2 of them featured end of game situations. So they drive right down on the Jaguars. They kicked the game-winning field goal. They didn't need the touchdown there. They just needed the field goal. So that's not really a loss. And then another one was, I believe, against the Cardinals, where they're in the red zone, but they're not trying to score. They're up, 20. And so they're not trying to score. So really, it's 8 of 21. 8 trips that you did not score touchdowns on because you committed a penalty. That's almost 40% of all of your red zone misses, not scoring touchdowns, derived from penalties. And by the way, another trip in week 1 against Philadelphia week 2 against the Colts, where it's 2 penalties in plus territory that actually keeps you out of the red zone. You didn't even make it in the red zone because of 2 penalties deep in plus territory. It also reminded me of 2 cowardly decisions by Matt LaFleur against the Eagles to go for it, to kick field goals inside the 10-yard line twice. This goes back to the point that I made the other day. The Packers are not going to beat these top teams being passive, being conservative. It's not going to happen. You have to be willing to go for it on 4th down. But if it's 4th and 8, that's a lot harder than 4th and 3. The Packers have learned that the hard way a couple times where they've had 4th and short. And then pre-snap penalties, you can't even get the snap count off, have hurt them. That stuff is just maddening. It's hair pulling for coaches and fans and podcasters. If the Packers can cut out the penalties, like forget the execution and just give the ball to Josh Jacobs. No, just don't commit penalties in the red zone. And this offense is good enough to overcome them. Even with Malik Willis, we saw them a number of times. They have 1st and 20, and they end up, getting points out of that drive. If you don't create those negative plays, this offense just is so hard to stop. And okay, I went back and I was going to chart negative plays, but it's yeah, of course, if you get stopped in the red zone, it's probably because you had a negative play. It's probably because you went from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 11, or you went from 1st and 10 to, 2nd and 18 because you got sacked. But those are things that you can't necessarily control. You have to give credit for a sack, for example, or a tackle for loss, or those kinds of things. It's not to anyone else's credit that you false start. And a lot of these are pre-snap penalties, false starts. A lot of these in the red zone have been it was the number of false starts was staggering. And then there's, Elton Jenkins got popped for an unnecessary roughness. Holding is part of the game. It happens. I get it. I kind of want to chalk that up to bad luck. But enough of these are very clearly just Packer boneheaded mistakes that I think it's worth pointing out. If they just don't do that, and we've seen that the last couple of weeks, they have not had the penalties. And guess what? They've been scoring. Now, unfortunately for them, you lose a game against the Lions because of a penalty called late. But I guess them's the breaks. Man, I've already done the rant. I don't need to do the rant again. It's annoying. Stop doing it. Stop putting it in the hands of the referees. And go beat the Seahawks on Sunday night. All right, follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers, Blue Sky, all the social medias. We're over there, TikTok, Instagram, everywhere. And subscribe over on our YouTube page because we're going to be live after the game, having a lot of fun after the Packers beat the Seahawks. I really do think the Packers are going to beat the Seahawks by a touchdown or more. That's where I am. If this team is who we think they are, if they are what their DVOA says they are, and you get Jaire Alexander back, you get Edgerrin Cooper back, Evan Williams plays, Romeo Doubs plays, you should beat this team by a touchdown or more. So we'll talk to you next time so you can stay locked on Packers.